What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the fifth episode of Buffalo Dash. It's so good to see you all again. Really excited to go into today's episode. With that, let's jump right in. So, probably the biggest piece of news on the ledger is that the Big Ten announced their unanimous decision to return to play. They plan for a late October start date, but nevertheless, Big Ten football is coming back, which leaves the Pac-12 as the only Power Five conference to yet announce not even a start date or anything. So I think this Big Ten decision plays a lot on the decision that the Pac-12 has coming up. Personally, again, you all know my personal preference on how college football should go. I don't believe there's a season, but the higher ups in the Big Ten think that it's the correct time to go back to playing football. And that's great for all the Big Ten schools. They get college football back. They get to join the rest of the Power Five conferences that are not named the Pac 12, and they get to go back to football. But yeah, is a decision a good one? I mean, it's hard to tell. So far, with the rest of the college football games, we're not seeing any major outbreaks within teams. So I think if they can stay that way, it's a good thing. But in terms of Pac-12, I definitely think this puts a lot of pressure on Larry Scott and the higher ups in the Pac-12 to come to a decision. Now, there's been what seems like some misunderstanding between the Pac-12 and the states that have been waiting for that the Pac-12 have been waiting for the go-ahead to start playing. So recently, after the Big Ten decision came out, Larry Scott said this. He said, "At this time, our universities in California and Oregon do not have approval from state or local public health officials to start contact practice. We are hopeful that our new daily testing capability, which I covered last week with the rapid testing, can help satisfy public health official approvals in California and Oregon to begin contact practice and competition. We are equally closely monitoring the devastating fires and air quality in our region at this time. We are eager for our student athletes to have the opportunity to play this season as soon as it can be done safely in accordance with public health authority approvals." So what's the interesting part about this is that after Larry Scott put out this statement, both Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of California, and the governor of Oregon were quite confused, come to think of it, about this statement from Larry Scott. I know specifically Newsom said the state of California has no problem with the four Pac-12 schools, USC, UCLA, Cal, and Stanford, proceeding with college football. This is definitely the first step in the return of Pac-12 football. Now that I know Colorado has got it decently under control, I'm not quite sure about Washington or Arizona or Utah, but since California has four Pac-12 schools and Oregon has two, that makes up half of the Pac-12 right there. They have the go-ahead to start playing football again. I think we possibly could be seeing Pac-12 football on the horizon. Now, I also think this looks a little bad on Larry Scott's part. Now, if you're a true Pac-12 fan and you're a diehard follower of your whatever college you are, for me it's Colorado, you know that Larry Scott is not the most favorite person in terms of Pac-12 sports. He has been quite questionable, come to think of it, in his decision making and in terms of some of the more administrative side of college sports. But needless to say, this definitely put him in the spotlight of not only the Pac-12 but the rest of the Power Fives. Now that the Big Ten joins the other three Power Fives, it puts a lot of scrutiny on the Pac-12 to start up their college football season again. And unfortunately, the longer they wait, the further back they have to push a start time. And it's mid-September right now, and the Big Ten is looking to start late October. So we can imagine if the Pac-12 doesn't make a decision by the end of September, we could be seeing Pac-12 football coming back possibly mid-November, possibly a week one Thanksgiving. At that point, the rest of the college football season has progressed through its weeks, and we still don't know the whole entire picture of the college football playoff. That definitely puts a hamper on any hope the Pac-12 had sending a team to the college football playoff. Um, Everyone thinks it's either going to be a team like Oregon, possibly a Utah, or even on the outskirts in ASU if they can perform extremely well this season. But the Pac-12 being super unaware of what's going on and being super indecisive in their decision making puts a hold on any hope that a Pac-12 school will make the college football playoff. While I don't think it's likely, you never know. Someone could have an absolute Cinderella season, go undefeated, and possibly squeak in there. What's also interesting is that would the Pac-12 have to explore their decision to make a Pac-12 only schedule, or will they try to incorporate games with people out of conference? Which also goes back to my argument about the starting point. If you wait this long, those teams have already played their non-conference games and have played a majority of their in-conference games. So you're kind of stuck in a position where you can either ask these teams if they want to extend their season, which I doubt they will, because by that point they'll be tired and they'll be winding down, and it'll always be time for conference playoffs. So the Pac-12 has to look at that logistical side of that as well. But bottom line, the Big Ten decision to come back definitely not only puts scrutiny on the Pac-12 to speed up their decision and do something fast, but it gives Pac-12 football fans a hope that we could be seeing Pac-12 football sooner or later. Even when a month ago it looked really grim that the Pac-12 was super staunch in their decision to postpone it to at least the beginning of 2021. But again, as time progresses, as the other Power 5 schools, 3 of them which have already started, and now the Big Ten, which has decided to go to begin their season, it definitely gives a lot of hope to Pac-12 schools that football is coming up, that the main concern of getting a governor's approval to play football is out of the way, that Newsom and the governor of Oregon have okayed the start of football practice. So if you're a Pac-12 football fan, which I know I am, and I hope you guys are as well, there's a lot of hope. Here's to hoping that Larry Scott and the Pac-12 make a decision soon, and we can move into a college football season. That being said, if a Pac-12 season does roll around, what about this Colorado offense? Now, last year, scoring points was never the issue for Colorado. The anomalies were the games against Oregon, which their defense was incredible. I watched that game and we just could not compete. And our game in Pullman where we got torched by Washington State and we couldn't score any points. That being said, we did lose, I think, 2 key pieces to our offense. Our first one is Steven Montez. He's a very frustrating player for me. Man has got one of the best arms I've ever seen out of a college football player. He could throw 60-yard bombs like no one else. He had amazing arm strength. He can make super incredible throws. I won't go to as far as say Patrick Mahomes, but he could make those type of throws, not as successfully, but he could do it. But the problem is he had poor pocket awareness. Whenever he was pressured, he'd always just kind of crumple up and fall to the ground and take a sack. And he was constantly being pressured, which forced a lot of ill-advised throws and a decent amount of interceptions. But he still isn't the biggest piece. By far, the biggest piece of CU's offense that they lost is their wide receiver in Laviska Shenault Jr. Now, this man was an absolute beast. He was an extremely versatile player. He was able to play from the wildcat position, and whenever CU had those 3rd and 2s or 4th and 2s, he was always a good bet that he would get at least 5 yards, which was really nice for Colorado. Super dependent. Not Not only that, his yards after the catch and his ability for yards after the catch was outstanding. While he's a good pass catcher, as one should be as a wide receiver, what really set him apart from basically everyone else in the college football, I think, was his ability after the catch and to run through contact. Now, I got to watch him play in person in the games against Air Force and the game against USC. He just dominated the field. It took at least 3 guys to tackle him, and he was basically an impact player on every play, and he just electrified the CU offense. While injuries kind of hampered his 2019 season, obviously he was still good enough to go second round, scored a touchdown in his first professional football game. He definitely has a promising career coming up. That being said, looking forward to this current CU offense, how can we fill these holes? Well, in terms of the quarterback position, it's kind of a toss-up right now. In terms of returning people, you have guys like Tyler Lytle and Sam Neuer, who have basically not seen a snap of college play since they were freshmen and since they arrived at CU, because they arrived in the time where Steven Montez and Sefo Lufau had the starting job. But I think the true person who can step in and maybe not quite fill in the shoes of Steven Montez, but have a different game is the incoming freshman named Brandon Lewis. Now, he was a big-time recruit in the Mel Tucker era coming out of Texas, one of the top-ranked dual-threat quarterbacks in the league. If you don't know what a dual-threat quarterback is, that means he can kill you with his arm and he can kill you with his legs. And I think he could be a nice change of scene for the CU offense. We saw it in 2016 with Sefo Lufau, who was an extremely good dual-threat quarterback. He did it with his arm and he did it with his legs. And I think we saw Steven Montez more of like a pocket passer. I kind of compare it to Big Ben. He had a fantastic arm, but he wasn't very mobile in the pocket, and he usually scrambled for 5 yards, but that was usually never good enough. But Brendan Lewis can come in, complement the super strong running back core, which I'll get to in a second, plus have a good enough arm to make the throws, make the 15-yard slant throws that we need to have successful football games. So I think he definitely fills an empty quarterback spot, and give him 2 years, give him a freshman and a sophomore year to really get used to the college football life. And I think he can be really successful and make himself a household name in college football. In terms of the running back position, we have Jared Mangham and Alex Fontenot. Now, I would say the running back game kind of got backseated last year just because Steven Montez had this incredible arm. But I think now that he's gone, I think Calderell really has to look to get them more incorporated in the offensive game plan, because they're 2 really explosive running backs. Jared Mangham in the opening game against Colorado State had 3 rushing touchdowns. Fontenot had a rushing touchdown against the rivalry win against Nebraska, and they showed a lot of promise, but they seemed to kind of get lost as the season progressed last year, and I don't think Mel Tucker really took advantage of their abilities. But now that they're gone, look for them to be big players, as well as incoming freshman Ashad Clayton, who was one of the top-ranked running backs out of the whole entire state of Georgia, with a super big recruiting sign for Mel Tucker. And obviously he decided to stay when Mel Tucker left. So I think he can be a really big piece of the puzzle to a CU offense who, I'm not going to say is going to struggle to score points next year, but they're losing their 2 best people who produce the points for them. So that trio of running backs, I think, can become really dangerous in college football. Much like Lewis, I think if Ashad Clayton gets a freshman and sophomore year to really get used to the college football scene, I think he can break through and make a name for himself, much like a Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin did, who absolutely tore up the league last year. So look for him to be a big part of the CU offense. In terms of wide receivers, I say CU is in a bit of a in-between kind of position. They lost Laviska Shenault Jr., big loss. You're just not going to find somebody like him. Somebody like him doesn't come along every year. But the biggest guy to step up is Katie Nixon. Now, he tested the draft waters. He put his name in there, but he decided to come back to CU for his final season. I believe because if he came back, he would have been the number one option for whoever plays at quarterback. He can be the captain of the CU offense, be a captain of the whole Colorado team, if you ask me, and be a vital part to the CU offense. While he's not the biggest wide receiver you see, he's got really good hands and incredible speed. So if he can catch the ball and get past at least one defender, he's usually good for a 30-yard gain. He was arguably one of the biggest impact players in our win over Nebraska last year. So look for him to be a key piece of the CU offense. And the other wide receiver who I think is an interesting name to throw around is Brendan Rice. So when you think of Rice, you think of, Jerry Rice. Yes, the great former NFL quarterback and now wide receiver and now legend, has had a son, and he has committed to CU, one of the top-ranked wide receivers coming out of Arizona. And he looked really good on film, really good in high school, and I think he can fit right into a pretty decent wide receiver core, if you ask me. A lot of veterans coming back who saw a lot of action last year with the Chenault injury. So him combined with Katie Nixon as the one and a veteran receiver core can be a really, really scary option for that CU offense. In terms of the tight end position, CU doesn't utilize their tight ends as much as they probably should. They kind of use them more as a blocking tight end. The occasional catch, look for a guy like Brady Russell, who is basically their main tight end. He's got really decent blocking abilities. Nowhere near the likes of like a George Kittle, because that guy's an absolute beast. He was an absolute beast at Iowa. But if he definitely can improve his hands, he's big. He's got the nice luscious flow of hair. He looks like your typical tight end, if you ask me. But if he can improve his hands, improve his blocking ability, I think he can be a super crucial part to that CU offense that definitely needs a big guy that a 7-yard check down to is an automatic kind of thing, that they know he's going to catch the ball and they know it's a for sure gain of 7 yards. So look for him to be also a crucial part of that CU offense. But bottom line, the offense did lose 2 key players, but I think they kind of stay the same. I don't think they got worse. I don't think they got better. They have a lot of young talent that's going to take time to mature. But I think guys like Clayton and Brendan Lewis can be instant impact guys that can not necessarily fill the shoes of Montez and Chenault, but definitely get their foot in the door, make a name for themselves within the Colorado football community, and start gaining the hype that they deserve because they're really good football players, and I think they can really elevate this Colorado football program back into a successful program and back into a contention for a Pac-12 South title. So, in terms of Pac-12 South titles, what is the best Colorado game in recent memory? Now, I followed Colorado football for, I'd say, about 4 years now, much before I decided to come to school here. I've always kind of known about their storied program, and I kind of talked about that in one of my previous episodes. But they've had a lot of key games these past years. And what's the best one? Let's name a few to begin with. So the newest and most obvious one was our overtime victory against Nebraska last year. It was week 2. Both Nebraska and Colorado were coming off of relatively easy wins, but it's a rivalry game. The Colorado-Nebraska rivalry runs really deep between the two states. They have a lot of storied history going back to when they were both part of the Big 8, and they are both the golden franchises of college football, if you want to call it. And CU came out absolutely flat in the first half. We went into halftime down 17-0, and Mel Tucker must have either cursed the whole team out or gave them some sort of pep talk, because they came out in the second half and that defense looked so good. And at the end of the third quarter, we rushed for a rushing touchdown. It was 17-7. First play of the fourth quarter, 96-yard flea flicker from basically Colorado's own end zone to make the game 17-14. The stadium was absolutely ecstatic. I mean, I got to give credit to Nebraska. Half of it was red. It was super awesome, really cool experience. And basically, short story is we somehow tied the game, which honestly I don't know how. We were absolutely outmatched in that game. Sent it to overtime. We got the ball first, kicked the field goal, and then their kicker shanked it wide right. We beat them 33-30. We all rushed the field when he shanked it. Absolutely ecstatic. Probably one of the greatest sporting events I've ever been to personally. One of the probably most memorable wins in recent Colorado football history because honestly, these past 10 years, except for 2016, have not been good at all. Speaking of 2016, the 2016 game, football game against Utah, it was held in Folsom, and this game was basically to decide who's going to win the Pac-12 South and be able to take a stab at Washington in the Pac-12 conference championship game. And 2016 was probably the anomaly year, if you ask me, in the past 10 years of Colorado football. That's back when they had Philip Lindsay and Sefo Lufau and guys like Chidobe Awuzie, Kavion Ento, kind of, I wouldn't say household names in the NFL, but, you get the point. Everyone knows who Philip Lindsay is. Just a great all-around game from Colorado. This is against a really good Utah team. I got to give them a lot of credit. But Colorado wanted it more. They had a much better season. They had won their first Pac-12 South title since joining the Pac-12. But, we all know that we got absolutely demolished by Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. But they did go on to go to the first ever college football playoff. And then we got blown out by Oklahoma State in our bowl game. But we won a big-time game in Folsom at night, nationally televised. It was cold. From stories I've heard, super awesome football game to be at. They rushed the field after. Super awesome time. As well in the 2016 season was the game against Stanford. So this game didn't really decide anything, but it made Colorado bowl eligible for the first time in a decade. So that's basically a big deal in Colorado. We haven't made a bowl game since 2016, and then before that, we hadn't made a bowl game since the early 2000s. And this was a gritty game. Colorado won 10-5. Yes, you read that right, or you heard that right. A football game finished 10-5, but we beat Stanford in Palo Alto. Super gritty game. Sefo got hurt that game, but somehow Colorado pulled it out, and they clinched a bowl game for the first time in a decade. Super awesome in CU's history, especially a super awesome game in that 2016 season. Really showed the resiliency and the skill that team had to basically win those gritty games. Super great game in general. And I think the last big game was the 2018 game against Nebraska. Now, the roles were reversed. Colorado went into Lincoln in 2018. Now, this Nebraska team had a lot of hype around it. They had a super young, promising quarterback in Adrian Martinez. That team was stacked in talent. That was the year Nebraska was supposed to come back and be on top of the college football world again. Yet somehow CU went in there. Super, super great game. Super close. Laviska had 2 touchdowns. Laviska basically had his way in that game. It came down to I believe Nebraska was leading by 3. Super late in the fourth quarter, Colorado drove. Montez threw an absolute dime to Laviska, diving in the end zone to go up by 5 with, I believe, 1.5 to go, and Nebraska would not be able to come back. Super, super, super awesome rivalry game between the two. It was in Lincoln. Probably one of the hardest places to play because they constantly sell out their stadium. They have some of the best fans in college football. Just coming from a Colorado fan who hates Nebraska, but I got to give him credit where credit's due. But I'd say a defining win in the recent history of that rivalry. And then obviously that next year in 2019, we would beat them on home turf in overtime. like I said, probably arguably the best sporting event I've ever been to. But bottom line, I'd say the best CU football game in recent memory, number one, would have to be that 2016 game against Utah, just because of the stakes it had. It clinched Colorado a Pac-12 South title. It sent them to the Pac-12 championship game. Colorado was ranked top 10 in the nation. Everyone thought that Colorado had returned to its glory, but we all know what happened in the years after that. I'd say number two would be the 2019 Nebraska game, just because of the way it played out, the comeback, the overtime, the missed field goal, the rushing of the field. Half the stadium was red. It was such an awesome environment. Number three would be the 2018 Nebraska game, just because we beat them in Lincoln, one of the hardest places to play college football in. And number four would be the 2016 game against Samford. Yeah, it clinched us a bowl berth for the first time in a decade, but it was a 10-5 game. Colorado was the better team. They probably should have blown out Stanford. But needless to say, they won the game. They made a bowl. All is good. All is well. With that, I want to thank you guys so much for coming to episode 5 of Buffalo Dash. I truly appreciate all the support you're giving me. If you want to check out more of me or some of the other shows, I highly recommend it. You want to check us out on social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Dashboards TV. We're posting every day. We're posting some of the clips we like from our shows. Also, recently, we partnered with a organization called Sports Pac-12, where we made a partnership. So we'll be writing, our co-host and columnist will be writing columns there about some of the topics we're discussing in each of our shows. Each of shows have their own column. It's super awesome. They have a lot of awesome Pac-12 content on there as well. Super awesome articles. Definitely check that out. That will be linked in the description and on our website. And if you want to see more of me, more of my other co-hosts, head over to our website, dashboards.tv, to check out more. Once again, thank you so much, guys. It's always a pleasure, and I'll check you out next week. Have a